they can do. When you look at animals or lower level organisms, you by and large know they will all do the same thing. All coronavirus are going around and doing the same thing. But no two humans are doing the same thing. Although biologically, physically, chemically, we are composed of the same stuff. And this is the big thing. This is the big thing today, that we have now finally come to a stage where we are beginning to understand the potential of the human brain and work towards getting the most of it. Now, I will shock you by saying that so far the purpose of education was that you don't use your brain. Major part of education was, the whole goal was, you should not use your brain because using your brain could be a threat to everybody else. And therefore the whole idea was that, and you were supposed to be a mechanical body. And that is why, in fact, have you ever wondered why attempting to suicide was punishable under the IPC? Once I was young, and as you know, when people are young, you have all these. I was always wondering, why is it that suicide is a punishable offense? If you commit suicide successfully, there is no punishment. But if you attempt and fail, it was a punishable offense. Only recently they have taken it out of that punishability and tried to put it in your military fitness. But why? The idea was that you belong to the state, you belong to the king, you belong to the rulers, and you were a physical body capable of manual work, and that is being denied to the state, and therefore you are punished. Because otherwise, you cannot, any reasonable society, how can you think that suicide or attempt to suicide can be a punishable offense? And so on and so forth. So it's only now that we are coming to a stage where we are beginning to understand. And you will, if you look at just recently, even now, for example, many leaders are mindlessly quoting that India has a demographic dividend because we have more number of young people than elderly, and the number of elderly is increasing in Yemen. World over, we are the. How does being young help? Only in terms of physical power. That your muscular power is more. But the cognitive power, I mean, you see all these writers, creative people, thinkers, they're not necessarily young people. In fact, the one who got the Nobel Prize in mathematics. Now, see, you heard of the Nobel Prize. Nobel Prize is given in physics, chemistry, biology, life sciences, peace, literature, and now also I learned in economics. Because Alfred Nobel never thought that mathematics will have any use. So he wanted to do only things which are useful. So no prize for maths. So for maths there is some other prize called Abel Prize and Field Medal and so on. The recipient of the Abel Prize recently is a person who is older to me. When I look at it, then he was like in 80s and he's a professor of mathematics and so on and so forth. So this is no longer about young, only young can do physical things which is more than you, but there are machines to do physical things. Today, you press a button and you can almost annihilate the planet if you want, but at least you can move so many things. In fact, that is why you remember that some time back, women were considered inferior because physical power they did not have. In fact, if you did arithmetic of my times, then the daily wages of women laborers was less than the daily wages of men laborers. So the exercise of the problem is that so many women, so many this thing are working, women wages are less and so on. But today when you have to press a button, you are as powerful. You don't even press a button. Now you use a Wi-Fi to remotely do something. So even that energy is not required, and probably in due course you will have something over here as a headband and you will only think of pressing the button and the button will be pressed. So things will change. So the point I am trying to say is that education is into a very, very fundamental change. Another important point, and this you must understand very seriously. In the past, education was about bringing people up to date. So when you join a university or a school or a college or whatever, you are learning all that your predecessors learned when they were in school to college. I say this very often. This is one of my favorite stories. Like when I did my MSc Physics from Allahabad University between 1964 to 1966, I used exactly the same notes as my uncle used from 1942 to 1944. Things have not changed. The same interference, pattern, this thing, same questions, same this thing, and they were very systematic. They wrote very nicely. I am more of a scattered brain. I will go from here and there. So those notes are very useful. And I also did very well. I got a second, whatever. Things did not change. And what was the basic thing that they did? I learned in 64, 66 what my uncles had learned in 40. Tomorrow's education is not that. Tomorrow's education, you don't want to say, oh, now you also know what your elder brother knew. You're saying you are going to face a new world. And the idea that are all philosophical thing, fundamental difference. We were all groomed in school, college, university to be ready for the world, which had already been created by the people before us. What we are talking to children today is, you have to be ready to change the world. All your seniors have made a mess of it. And you have to go and undo that. So it is no longer following in the footsteps of your grandparents and parents, undoing the steps made by your parents and grandparents. And you know, things like climate change, things like economic things, global warming, overpopulation, everything is all about changing the world. And so you are educating for a completely different. And this is what is very important. One of my favorite people who have said this very well is a person called Guy Claxton. I'd like you to, the stage of internet, note these names and look for their work and YouTube videos, etc. Guy Claxton has coined a very nice word called learning power. So it's just like we talk of muscular power, which means, so if a person has a good muscular power, like we talk of people, young people from Punjab, Haryana, and so on, the good muscular, they can do anything. They can be in the police, they can be in the army, they can kill the fields, they can do so many things where physical muscular power is needed. If you have learning power, you can do so many things which are needed today in the area of problem solving. Why do we say that the IITians do well? Not because they have studied electrical engineering, mechanical engineering, but they're solving all kinds of other problems because their learning power is there. And this is, to me, a very, very important aspect. That the ability to learn, and many people have kind of defined this learning power as the ability to know what to do when you have not been taught what to do. See, when you have been taught, for every problem they told you a method of solving that problem. Find out the third triangle, the two angles of a triangle, two angles on a side, you can find this, etc. But you have a problem and nobody has told you what the solution is. How do you go about doing that? Now you cannot say, I have to wait till somebody tells me how to solve it and then do it. That kind of people are not required, so that will be done by a robot or a program machine or something. The solution is no. This is not what a computer does. You have a problem, you have a solution. The solution is called the algorithm. You have programming languages. You write the solution in the programming language, and the computer will do it. So if there is already a problem for which the solution is not known to you, doesn't matter. Somebody will write the program for it, and you can do that. That's how you use Excel and so on and so forth. You do that. What humans are very required to do is to solve new problems for which the solution is not known. And then everybody is going to become a discoverer, a scientist, explorer, whatever you want to call it. There is enough new to explore. And therefore, developing learning power becomes a very, very important aspect. In fact, this guy Claxton goes and creates another word. He says when you go to school, you develop a disease called tortitis. And tortitis means that you cannot do anything which you have not been taught. And only if you have been taught something can you do it. Otherwise, this is not been taught, this is not in syllabus, etc. And CBSE very kindly knocks out more than half things every year from the syllabus so that you don't have to worry. Which means it's making you even more incompetent than what you would have otherwise been. So I'm just saying some of these remarks basically to trigger and provoke you. And quite happy if somebody wants to raise their hands, comments, etc. Then we can carry on this as a multi-threaded conversation rather than a one-way conversation. There's somebody ready to make some comments, observations, and so on and so forth. Any thoughts, ideas, comments? Yes, very good. That's nice.
First of all, hearty welcome to the group. Really very interesting to learn from you in a very dynamic way, in a very enthusiastic way. And there is one very humble suggestion for learning a very new thing. It doesn't mean that to discard the old or to criticize the old. If we add value to our education, having all respect for what we learn. Probably the way you are telling, you want to give encouragement to the young, but not at the cost of criticizing the old. I beg your pardon. See, while telling that what we learned in 1944 and 46, the same thing we learned in 64 and 66, because sun rises in the east when the humanity began. Sun rises in the east today also. The basics do not change, but the values change. Particulate to biculate. Wonderfully explained. So, we'll be, particularly I will be very much happy to see that the current education we added as value addition, not at the cost of criticizing the old one. Thank you.
Thank you. So you brought up very well, and this is exactly the point I want to get on to. So he has brought up the distinction between facts, concepts, principles, and so on. And this is exactly what I'm trying to say, that we should be able to do that. And the problem is that in much of our education, because of rote learning, we are saying the same facts we repeat. So what I say, exam typically says, what is in the book without looking at the book. Now the whole idea is, and he said it very well, that how we do with facts, how we deal with concepts, how we deal with processes, how do we do it, is different. Some facts are unalienable, do not change. But some things change, because what we thought was a fact is no longer a fact. In fact, this famous thing that sun rises in the east is not a fact. Sun rises in the east was what was our perception for a long time. We realized that it is not a fact. And he's chosen this, which is a very beautiful example. It is described very well in Thomas Kuhn's book called The Structure of Scientific Revolutions. He says when science progresses, it does not progress in a linear fashion building upon the other. There are certain paradigms and then there are complete shifts in paradigm. And that is what I'm trying to say. And in terms of education, it's certain thing. He's talking about the sun. I will continue with that for a while because it's quite entertaining. So this is one of the big challenges of education. And it's only humans who can do that. Things that you perceive as obvious is not necessarily the truth. The first time I got exposed to this idea was in some very early school days. They said do a simple experiment. Put one of your hand in cold water, put the other hand in hot water, and after a while put both these hands in normal room temperature water. You will see that the hand which is in cold water feels warm, the one which is in hot water feels cold, and what is the truth? So the perception depends upon the frame of reference where you are from. So we believe for a long time, in fact it's very interesting, even big so-called scientists, Aristotle, etc., believe that the earth is the center of the world. I mean universe in fact, geocentric, our own thing. And fortunately for you, I am also an astrologer. So astrology was great fun. Because what happens is, suddenly Shani Vakri ho gaya, Jupiter Vakri ho gaya, वो उल्टा चलने लगा. Now you could scare people. राहु को ये हो गया, केतु को वो हो गया. Now पूजा पाठ करो, दान दो, ये दो, वो दो, वगैरह वगैरह. Now you know planets don't change. They don't start going in opposite directions. Just because you are seeing the Earth as the center They look doing all these things. This was from related times also, and we are actually even today. We will, if you read any of this horoscope column, they will tell you 20 अप्रैल को ये हो जाएगा, 25 अप्रैल को ये हो जाएगा, फिर ये बकरी हो जाएगा, फिर शनि इसमें चला जाएगा. कहीं नहीं वो उसी डायरेक्शन में जा रहा है जिसमें जा रहा है. And when you understood Keplerian model, and you get set at the center, you found these 9 planets go nicely in elliptic orbits, you know what the orbits are, you can predict everything else. You keep on improving. So there are two things. One is conceptual change, the other is improving on the data. So you have this thing, and then you improve on the, and in both these directions, you get improvement in knowledge. That is what the frontier of knowledge is about. But we must understand what changes. Now, the beauty of science is that science does not try to make you force fit into what was said was right. Now, we have this tendency, and very well known, very great people who believe that everything about the universe forever is written in the Vedas. And they believe that. And it is nice, simplistic things. See, we as humans are open to the complexity of the world. We want a simple thing. So either there is a human being whom we can understand, he rewards and punishes us. And we tell them that there is no reward, there is no punishment, these are just laws of nature which are enacting, and you don't know what you are in for. It's a very different thing. It doesn't look like it looks nice to say that. So we create the theory of karma, etc. Richard Dawkins has this concept, again, those of you who are interested, he has a concept of this thing called beams. So he said just like genes are biological material which go from one living organism to another in terms of replicating that, beams are ideas which are all pervasive. And this idea, for example, that eventually good will win over evil. We all believe this. We like to have our stories come out like this, etc. But in real life, you often find that evil is winning over good and enjoying your life. But we still somehow believe that eventually, one day, day of judgment in something else, this will happen. So we like, and this is exactly the issue, that how complex thing can you grow with? And the evolution of the human brain is about being able to deal with complexity. So now, take life for example. Life is the most complex thing, and within life, the brain is a very complex creature. So we try to simplify that in terms of Pavlovian conditioning or something else and so on, so that because we are used to a linear response, not used to a complex response. Now you know, for example, that monsoon system depends upon some effect somewhere in some place, etc. And the butterfly effect, and so on and so forth. So life is a little complex, and we like to simplify it, especially to, as Sir said, truths will remain forever. But actually, it is very difficult. Nothing is going to remain forever as a truth, because as we know more and more, that thing fundamentally changes. And science is something which is like that. And I will tell you some very recent things which kind of, it was a very good interjection, so I look forward for further such comments and observations and build on that. That will be more interesting. You feel like
So,
that?
yeah, I do really. And as a policy, I think just questioning about the day-old criticism of the past, and as you were saying that we shouldn't criticize to get. But as a careers counsellor of 16 years now, I think I'm still faced with the problems that I was when I started guidance and admissions and counselling young children, boys and girls. So I really feel that when I was going through the system, it was the 4 main professions in the minds of parents that you have to do is study law, chartered accountancy, medicine, or veterinary or dentistry or something like that. It's happening again every day when I counsel the boys and I counsel the girls. And I do feel that rather than children and need to be counseling the parents.
Absolutely, you're right.
You know, and until we are transient and put a litmus test to our thoughts with your, you know, lectures, which will go to plenty and ample, but at ground level, the change is very, very slow, sir, and very frustrating.
So that is exactly the point. See, you put it very well, and you need to tell your people, the chartered accountant as a profession will not exist. Forget that it is still there, it does not exist. And I can take you through some of the things. The important point is, in my view, you have to anticipate the future and prepare for it. And I have a very bold statement to make. The future will become the present whether or not you are prepared for it. This is a very important thing to remember. That just because the government says so, or this says so, or that so, the future is a relentless thing which is happening and will happen irrespective of whether you are prepared for it or not. There is in law a principle saying ignorance of the law is no excuse. Ignorantia juris non excusat and so on. This is typically in criminal law. So you cannot say I wasn't aware of it and therefore I did it. You are supposed to be aware of all the laws laid down by the Parliament, the Supreme Court, the High Court, the ruling, etc. etc. But life, there is something even more interesting. Life, ignorance itself is no excuse. If you are not aware that chartered accountant will not exist as a profession, or some new profession is going to come up, which is going to be a completely different thing, there is nothing that can be done. So the importance of thinking and critical thinking, so that is exactly what he said. You have to say, what will continue? In what form it will continue? See, in some sense, certain things continue, the broad principles. So for example, if you talk to a person like me, the laws of physics continue. Our understanding improves and changes, but the law was always there. If you believe the other way around, in karma, the law of karma continues. What we were talking as good karma, bad karma, etc., changes. Lest you have a wrong impression that I am against everything old and fascinated with the new, I will share with you a lot of things on which I have pride on the Indian tradition. And I can go on, and sometimes you might almost think of me as this. But let me give you a couple of examples. The distance of the sun to the earth, it is actually moving, but on the average is 93 million miles. You must have read it in your school, etc. with your children. The speed of light is 186,000 miles per second. So how much time does light take to come from the surface of the sun to the surface of the earth? I'm deliberately saying surface of the sun to the surface of the earth because from the interior of the sun to the surface of the sun is a field of nuclear physics, into which I don't want to get. But take a simple thing. Distance, speed, what is the time? Now some of you may remember from your school days it is 8 minutes or 8 minutes per second. Or you may say, okay, let's write 93 million, let's write 186,000, it is 1000 upon 2, so 500 seconds. 500 seconds, 8 minutes, 20 seconds, and you got the right answer. Very good. This is the Hindu method of doing it. Now, for a moment, let us turn to the Romans. You heard of the Roman Empire, etc., etc. Much of our law is based on Roman law, etc., etc. Write 93 million in Roman, write 186,000 in Roman, and try to find out how much time it will take. You can't do it. Because first, there is no zero there. There is no zero, there is no division, no cancellation. You have to keep on subtracting in Roman 186,000 from 93 million, 520 times. By that time, you would all be retired and gray and everything and so on and so forth. So this is the brilliance of Indians. And that is why we knew more about including all these that we tell Bakri, Akri, etc. But we knew more about astronomy than anybody else in the world. And I'm not saying this out of any passion. I'm a great person, by now you will have figured out what kind of interests are. So there's a book called Ideas, From Fire to Freud, by a person who was a MIT professor. So he wrote about ideas from all over the world. And when he was writing about India, he wrote this. He said in AD 499, Aryabhat calculated the value of pi at 3.14159. He calculated the elliptic orbits of the planets. So what is this fuss of Kepler having discovered it 1000 years later? So although I mentioned Kepler, we were 1000 years ahead of Kepler in AD 500. So I can give you any number of stories, but let me give you one more story before I switch topics. And meanwhile, you think of a topic on which to start and thread. You've all heard of Satyanarayan Katha? I was taught, unfortunately or fortunately, my early schooling in a Christian missionary school. So I know all about the Bible, Abraham begat Isaac, and Isaac begat Jacob, so many generations. I can tell to you about sermons of the Mount, precept, the being of the shall inherit the earth. But I didn't know much about the Satyanarayan Katha. But as I grew up, one day I was sitting there and said, let me hear the Katha. What's wrong? I'm sitting here waiting for the prasad to come. I just hear what the story is. Now I will recall to you that if you read the Satyanarayan Katha story, the broad narrative that is going on is you must tell the truth and commit to whatever you have committed and actually do it. And there is an episode there where this, I think, son-in-law, father-in-law are going with a lot of jewelry in a boat, and they are accosted by somebody who says, what is there? And you know what they say? Ghas phoos ped patta, etc. Now, so far it is interesting, but what it said, if you hear the Katha carefully, and I was a good student, so I heard it carefully, it said, and the boat rose, and the people panicked. Now, why would the people panic? And why would they panic if the boat rose? The boat जा रही है, ऊपर होती है, नीचे होती है. Because they knew Archimedes' principle, the density of this garbage is much less than the density of gold and silver. Archimedes may have discovered Archimedes' principle a long time later, but every citizen of India who was on board knew this, and he got worried कि मेरा सोना चांदी घास फूस हो गया. And this is the beauty of the knowledge society, that for the aim, आम आदमी, it was a message कि झूठ मत बोलो, जो बोलोगे वो करो, भगवान कभी भी तथास्तु कह देंगे और कुछ हो जाएगा. But for the people who were pursuing knowledge, it was Archimedes' principle recorded because there was no writing, there were no books, there was no printing, there was no photocopying, etc. It was oral tradition. In the oral tradition, we copied exactly what we heard, but the interpretation was different for different people. Then this is where we have a huge problem with interpreting Indian traditions, because what has been said is cloaked in several meanings, and if you are not prepared with that meaning, you will not understand it. You might take it too literally, or you may not get it wrong, and so on. So this should establish to you, I have really, my only thing that sometimes comes is, should I be proud of this, or should I be ashamed of this? That all my ancestors were so great, they were so clever, they were years ahead of the time, and we are now looking for Finland as a model of education. So many educators are going to Finland to see the model of education. How stupid can you be? What is the comparison between Finland and India? In terms of size, in terms of culture, in terms of what? Also, sometimes I see posts on the internet that okay, this is the last one, I also get tempted. So you know there is this famous thing in Hanuman Chalisa, Yojan Sahasra Jo Bhanu, Gay Lady of Madhur Phal Janu. Now I was very fascinated with this story because I was a great admirer of Hanumanji, although it was more laddus that I liked. But the idea that Baal Samay Ravi Bhaksh Liyo, the Tino Log Bhayo Niyaro, the idea that he thought sun is just a flower and he ate it is amazing. So they will tell you that Sahasra Yojan Javan, they will then calculate it and come to that 93 million miles which I said, and they will say NASA is also saying the same thing. Now I tell you, tum buddhi ke bhrasht log, NASA is a 100-year-old thing. Our civilization is at least recorded 10,000 years. So, apna 10,000 years old ka agar data hai, instead of saying that we said it 10,000 years ago and we knew it, you are saying NASA ne bhi yahi kaha hai. So this is completely this thing. So the point is very simple that, or see, like for example, when you look at the world, everything is in the world is there which was billions of years ago or millions of years ago, etc., etc. Depending upon your context, you will look at that. If you are a geologist, you will look at that. If you are an anthropologist, you will look at various things. Now, of course, geologist also looks at DNA to find out what is the date of that. Earlier, he was only looking at fossils and paleobotany and this thing. Now, he's also put DNA analysis into figuring out how that thing happens. So, this is exactly the thing that we need to look at things, see their evolution over time, and the whole idea is we are trying to get a better understanding of the world or maybe the universe in a real sense. The point is, as we get to understand that better, we will have more meaningful lives. Now, one is the life of ignorance. That is also a very good life. You can simply say, "Sab Rabbi Maya hai, jo hai wo kar rahe." The other is, and this is what Einstein said. Einstein was not a disbeliever in God. So, unlike many scientists who are atheists and say there is no God, this, that, people are there. So, Einstein said, "Oh, I am just trying to figure out the mind of God." So, God के दिमाग में कौन सा इक्वेशन चल रहा है, वो इक्वेशन मैं निकाल रहा हूँ. So it is not inconsistent in that sense of the word. So don't get me wrong, okay? I am by no means trying to say that what was known to us was not good. In some sense, I am saying that we should continuously, it is not over. The only problem I want to say is that people should not have this feeling that there is a finite amount of things to know, and today actually, in fact, scientists, if you look at physics, is one of the most advanced. What physicists say? We know only about 9% of the matter that exists. 99% is dark matter, dark energy. We have no idea of it. So they are the only ones. See, it is very interesting. All these scientists, with hundreds of Nobel laureates, all these leading theories, they have the humility to say, we know only about 10% of the world. On the other hand, they have people say, yahin pe Sita nahi thi. They are so sure of that if you don't agree with it, they are ready to kill you. So this is the point that one is trying to get. And the point is, you will learn more only if you admit ignorance. If you think that you already know everything, I mean, there is nothing more to know, then you will not learn anything more. As you decide, I can from anywhere take a simple microscope. You see a naked eye, you see a lens, you see a microscope, you see a telescope, you see a radio telescope, you see an electron microscope, you see more and more of the world. If you ever look at your dahi under a microscope, you will never be able to eat dahi again. so this is the point, and this is the whole point. That with my new knowledge, can I still cope with the world as it is? I don't see all of you as 40 trillion cells. I see you as human beings and talk to you as human beings. But if I were to put it into a reductionist approach, each of you is about 40 trillion cells or with various kind of things and anyway. So again, a pause for some interjection, conversation, whatever. Yes, good. That's nice to see.
I would request people who are asking questions to please introduce themselves before they ask the question. Hello, sir.
Yeah.
So, my name is Geeta. I'm actually parent, mother, and I'm working with NGO, my own NGO. It's a very, very basic thing that I want to know. And this is something always that I feel that what is it that we as parents, it's a basic thing, a micro thing. How can we prepare our children? Because CBSE, as you said, that the courses. So what the school teaches us is rote learning. Okay. And secondly, they don't teach us what is in India. We know what's happening abroad, what's happening in America, what's happening in Europe. Why not that there are so? How can we help our children understand that, okay, fine, it's okay to question. Because questioning is something I think we have been told, don't question, just follow. So it's something very micro, and this is something we
No, this is very fundamental. See, the point is, in fact, of the various things that I said, the whole point about education, in fact, if you our tradition, we had a tradition where we said Brahmins deal with learning, etc. Kshatriya deal with that, etc. Now, if you look at the Brahmins themselves, they had this thing that the child, upon Upanayan, became something where his eyes were open to the world. For the others, they said, keep your eyes closed, just follow us. So the point is, when you have society, and it's a very interesting thing, how do we get an equitable social order? People who are in charge don't want others to know. In fact, if you look at it, we have something called the Official Secrets Act. Now, I find it very interesting. Here is a person who is asking for your vote. And the moment he gets elected to be minister, what he takes as the oath of office, I will not share with my people anything which comes to me during my official work. But you were elected for my work. Why will you not tell me what you will do for me? But that is the first thing they do in a public. Nobody see, I found it very awkward. I can say, and he says anything which comes in the course of my official work. See, private work don't tell others, but official work you have to tell because you are my official representative. And you say, I will not tell anybody anything which comes to me during the course of my official work. So the point is that when you want to rule, you rule by authority. And it's a sensitive thing to say, but why did we not give women education? So that if they are uneducated and we tell them Pati Parmeshwar, they will not ask any questions and obey. Now the wife says, no, I am no longer that thing. You have to tell me what you are doing, why you are doing, why should I do this, etc. And people don't like it. So, and the whole issue is, authority is one way of getting things done. But coming as equals is an extremely difficult thing. Democracy is easier said than done. Nobody actually believes in that. And each of us want to find how we are superior. But let me now come to the straight question. All children should be asked or encouraged to question everything. Now, it is a little bit dangerous to question Modi at this time, because then you could go to jail. But other than Modi, Amit Shah and Nadda, you can question everybody else. And the whole field of science and this thing, etc. is available for you to question. And this is how we progress. This is how we progress because we ask questions, and this is how we begin to understand. The authoritarian regime doesn't want to do that. I shared with you this thing about my MSc, etc., etc. I shared with you about school. So as you can guess, I was a bright student in school. I did very well, everything, etc., etc. But there was very little scope for creativity. Because I could not change Pythagoras theorem, I could prove everything in geometry, theorem 8, theorem 10, this, that, I could do wall construction, I could do binomial, everything. There was only one place where there was scope for creativity. Hindi Nibandh. Because in English I could not be creative. At the school level I didn't know enough English to be able to. I could repeat what people have been said and who wrote learning and quote Hamlet, Macbeth, Julius Caesar, whatever, but I could not write my own thoughts. Only place I could write my own thought was Hindi Nibandh. एक सवाल आ गया था, somewhere class 7-8 में, चरित्र निर्माण. बस मजा आ गया, हमने चरित्र निर्माण को लिख डाला. अरे इतनी डांट पड़ी कुछ हद नहीं. ये आपके वहाँ कंटेंट थोड़ा वो जो श्रीमन नारायण जी ने लेख में लिखा है, उसमें से बताइए कि उन्होंने क्या लिखा. Well, this is the point, and this is people who know that I am a very bright student and good student, and what I get for being creative and thinking of my own ideas is being told never to do that again. This is what life is all about. So we are giving people credit, and now who doesn't want, who wants to be, see, all said and done, I am pleased that I was a good student, I have good marks, etc. Why will I rebel against it? The only good thing that happened was that we kept these two things separate. School के लिए ये कहना है, but असली में ये है. So we learned that, and therefore, for school का तो God दूसरा था, हमारा God दूसरा था. So we learned this thing of keeping school separate, and this is what I encourage people. So I said, don't fight with school. You learn that school ये सुनना चाहता है. आप school के लिए ये कहिए. इसका एक बड़ा interesting joke है, बड़ा popular joke है कि बहुत सारे इंडियन बच्चे हैं जो आजकल US में ही पढ़ते हैं, वहीं रहते हैं, सब कुछ है. So there was this child, Gujarati child, because I'm trying to be honest with the story. It's not meant as anything against Gujaratis or something. And school was a thing which was promoting Christianity and so on, and the teacher was a great book of Lord Jesus Christ and so on. And as they know, they say that their narration is Lord Jesus Christ, the Son of God, he came to the earth to help this thing, etc., and so on. So teacher is then asking, who was that man who came to earth for our salvation, this, that, who gave his life for this. And none of the children were responding because आजकल अमेरिका का बेटा कहाँ जीसस की बात करता है. So एक गुजराती लड़के ने से हाथ लगाया, टीचर ने पूछा who is it? He said Lord Jesus Christ. So teacher was very happy. She told everybody that look here, look at this person. He's coming from India and he is telling us that Lord Jesus Christ came to save ourselves, etc. And you people, even though church is next to you, you have no idea. So then she asked the child, so what made you say that? The child says, Madam, in my heart I know it is Lord Krishna, but business is business. So this is what school teaches us. Because in your heart you may know it is Lord Krishna, but school wants you to say Lord Jesus Christ or Lord Amisha or Lord Moody or whatever. You say that, but don't believe in that. So you learn to be able to distinguish between what you say for rewards or etc. and understanding. But questioning is very important, and one of my favorite stories is, I have lots of stories. In fact, I have a small, I think, course that I created called questioneering. So I said engineering बाद में सीखना, questioneering पहले सीखो. And much of the greatest discoveries were made by people who asked inconvenient questions. In fact, those of you who have studied chemistry, anyone who studied chemistry in BSc, MSc, okay. So whatever, even high school. So in chemistry, you know, there are these gases called argon, neon, helium, etc., which are called the rare gases. How were they discovered? Because the chemist found that when we created these gases chemically, the weight was a little different from where we extracted it from air by removing nitrogen and oxygen. And he said, why is this difference coming? And he kept on chasing it. That led to the discovery of the inert gases. There are so many, I can give you examples where so many frontier discoveries were made because people were very careful in trying to figure out why is this not happening. I mean, you might say approximately it's the same, so what is the big difference? But the curious mind, the questioning mind, wants to know an answer to that. And this is how many great discoveries have happened over. The famous story is of Rabi. Rabi is a physicist who got a Nobel Prize for discovery of electron spin resonance, which is at the heart of MRI. When you use MRI anywhere, they put very large magnets, heavy magnets, and something happens, etc. All attributed to the discovery of Rabi. So when Rabi got the Nobel Prize, as often happens, journalists came to him and said, so what made you a scientist? And he said, my mother made me a scientist. He said, is your mother also a scientist? He said, no, my mother is a homemaker. But then how could she make you a scientist? He said, every day when other children used to come back to school, our parents used to ask, mother basically used to ask, what did you learn new at school today? But my mother asked, did you ask a good question today? And this is the point. If you ask good questions, relentlessly go after those questions, you will get amazing answers. So this is exactly the thing. But to be practical in life, you are supposed to suppress the desire to ask questions. And this is where the compromise is. Like if you want to make progress, if you want to understand, then you need to ask questions. And we have so many examples. In fact, in our own thing, we're talking of Indian tradition. Indian tradition was about questions. Often when we talk in modern times, they will talk to you about Socratic questioning and Socratic dialogue. But if you look at the Indian tradition, I don't know how many samvad there are. I mean, in Ramayana, I remember when we were very young, वो अंगद रावण संवाद बहुत अच्छा लगता था. उसके पहले लक्ष्मण परशुराम संवाद. लक्ष्मण ने परशुराम की जो ऐसी वैसी करी थी, that is something which is amazing. You look at the Mahabharata. Have you heard of that Yaksh Prashna episode of When you look at philosophy, then हम लोग Socrates की बात करते हैं, Socratic question. You look at this यक्ष प्रश्न thing. 33 questions, 4 parts each, 100 questions, entire world philosophy put there. I could give a whole talk on the philosophy from the Yaksha Prashna. And it is amazing that we have all this thing over there. And we have, so we, Hinduism is the only religion which is not a strict authoritarian religion. Modern people are trying to make it like this. See, very interesting. So if you look at the Abrahamic religions, that is Christianity and Judaism and Islam, they all come from authority. The Allah is but one and Muhammad is the last prophet. And Muslims don't like the Christians because Jesus Christ said, I am the Son of God, okay, and so on. And there are these shades of differences. In Hinduism, there can be any God. शिव जी भी गॉड हैं, रामचंद्र जी भी गॉड हैं, कृष्ण जी भी गॉड हैं, वो देवियाँ तो 9 हैं, तो वेल-नोन है जो हम नवरात्रि में याद करते हैं, वो है और सब तरह। तो हम कहीं ये झगड़ा नहीं करते, एक ही है। आप बोल रहे हो उसको पर इंटरेस्टिंगली, we talk so much about the Bhagavad Gita, no offense meant to your name, but we talk so much about the Bhagavad Gita, but the fact of the matter is Bhagavad Gita is an insignificant thing in Indian history, philosophy, whatever. There are so many Gitas. Yagyaval के साथ है, ये है, वो है, so many Gitas and so on. Bhagavad Gita became important because when the British came, they wanted to understand India. तो आप लोगों ने क्लास 7-8 में रेशियो एंड प्रोपोर्शन पढ़ा होगा, A is to B, C is to D. So उनको ये पता था कि मुस्लिम्स की कुरान होती है, हमारी बाइबल होती है, तो हिंदुस्तानियों की क्या है? A is to B, C is to D, हिंदुस्तानी। अब उनको पता है ऐसा है, 4 तो यहाँ वेद हैं, 18 पुराण हैं, इतनी मीमांसाएं हैं, और इतना सब कौन पढ़ेगा? तो उन्होंने ढूंढ के कहा यार कोई एक किताब बनाओ जो हमारी ये रेशियो प्रोपोर्शन को कर सके। तो उन्होंने भगवद गीता ढूंढी और एक एटकिंसन साहब को ट्रांसलेशन का ठेका दिया, विल्किंसन साहब को, उन्होंने ट्रांसलेट करके, और हम लोग सब भगवद गीता को मानते नहीं मिलती। बट भगवद गीता क्या है? उतनी बड़ी महाभारत के 18 अध्याय में एक लड़ाई के बारे में, मैंने कई बार आई हैव बीन वेरी इंटरेस्टेड इन अंडरस्टैंडिंग कि ये भगवद गीता के दौरान दुर्योधन रुका कैसे रहा। वो लड़ने को आतुर और ये लेक्चर दे रहे हैं। तो भगवद गीता कुल जो है, मैंने एस्टिमेट किया कुल मिला के 90 मिनट से ज़्यादा की नहीं है, चाहे उसमें वो है 800 श्लोक करीब है, वो है करीब 90 मिनट का। It is a standard lecture that we give nowadays. So the point was that is a small thing, and it is by no means something which is comprehensive. It is a small episode. As I said, अगर वो उनसे भी ज़्यादा वो होते तो यक्ष प्रश्न को पकड़ लेकर के, तो यही हिंदुओं का प्रेम होता कि क्या है कैसे है। So the point is that questioning is an essential part, and the interesting part is, because I come from a science background, the answers to the questions keep on changing. A very nice story I'd like to share with you about Albert Einstein. So Albert Einstein was a professor of physics in something called Institute of Advanced Study, Princeton. एक बहुत मशहूर, बहुत अच्छा इंस्टीट्यूट है, वहाँ पे सब एक से एक नंबर लॉरेट रहे हैं। तो like everything else, it was exam time, so he had to make a question paper for his physics students, and the year is 1905. So कोई कंप्यूटर नहीं है, कोई फोटोकॉपियर नहीं है, कोई जेरोक्स नहीं है, कोई कुछ नहीं है, टाइपराइटर था, टाइपराइटर तब तक पैदा हो चुका था। So the method was that the professor will write a question paper by hand, give it to his teaching assistant will take it to a typist will type it, make copies, give it to the students will write the answer, so on. Teaching assistants are usually people who are interested in the subject and working in that institute. Many of you may have known people among your background who have gone to the US, etc., and as teaching assistant they earn some money to support their educational expenses, so they are knowledgeable. So when this teaching assistant saw the question paper, he was very surprised. He thought Einstein is becoming senile. He said, but professor, these are exactly the same questions that you gave to the same students just last year. And Einstein is said to have replied, you are right. The questions are the same, but the answers have changed. This is the situation about education. Questions are still the same. What do we teach? How do we teach? where do we teach, how do we assess, who will teach, how will we do the training, but the answers have changed. And why did Einstein say that? Because 1905, Einstein wrote 4 papers in physics which changed physics completely. So before that, physics was what is called Newtonian physics or classical physics. Einstein had 4 papers that year. One was on Brownian movement, one was on photoelectric effect, one was on the special theory of relativity, and one was on a famous equation called E is equal to mc square, where he said energy and matter are the same thing. And therefore, everything before that has now changed. We are into the same issues on education. And we are now, education still continues, is a need, is an important thing. But the answers to the questions of what, why, so first was, we are teaching people so that they know what is the accepted answer to the question. Today we are saying we are teaching so that they can ask new questions and explore answers for those questions and so on and so forth. Okay, so time for somebody else to
Okay. Yeah, I'm Sonam Rana and I'm the school. So I want to thank you. It was very, very good touching listening to you. And the other thing is also, I think you're a man a little ahead of your time. It's nice to be here. 2 things that came to my mind just listening to comments from colleagues here is I think that what the discussion we're having today, it's very, very relevant and current. It's not about what is, but it's about what has to be within the context of what is, right? And the only thing that is constant and the only thing that is real is change. I really believe that. And how do we get our future generations, or even our current generations or past generations, on board with so much change that's happening? The question that the career counselor asked, I thought was interesting because we get the same question all the time. And if you look at issues like a couple of years ago, about a decade ago, the whole phenomenon of jobless growth started, right? We didn't take it very seriously. The UN was writing reports that there's going to come a time very shortly where there would be no longer jobs of the typical jobs of the bank clerks or your office assistant. And that's happening already today. People have to adjust. The same is going to be for tomorrow in terms of, it's not that there won't be a need for CAs or for lawyers, but it's how those CAs and lawyers also adjust to a changing context. So where do you see within this framework issues like maybe not just your rote learning and not just your technical knowledge, which in the context of information age, everyone can pick up any information from anywhere, but the analysis and things like emotional intelligence, social behavior, all those issues, where do you see that fitting?
I see that exactly what you said. See, what happens is, if you look at the progress of humanity, we have been able to do more and more difficult problems with time. Forever. And I like to share such stories. So when I was young, my mother used to tell me that there was a time when all, you might call reasonable families, would have a human barber coming to their house every other day to shave the menfolk of the house. The simple safety razor which was created put an end to that barber's thing. Now they come only on Mundan and Shadi Vyah, Janevu and so on. The daily barber visit is completely off. And this was done not by any great technology, simple safety razor blade. And I can go on and on with examples that what happens is, see, humans are meant for a much larger purpose than what we are doing. As I was saying in this question, when you start asking yourself a question, what is the purpose of my life? Is your purpose in life to have a job in a career with some employer who is going to do that? Karl Marx was totally against it. Now, because it becomes slightly well-paid jobs, we have become very excited about it. See, well-paid slave or a poorly paid slave is a slave anyway. So I remember once there was a discussion with somebody in the US, for example. There are people who maintain teams of players, football players, this, that. These teams are privately managed, privately owned. And one of the person was telling this person in his interview, you treat them like cattle. And he said, but pretty well paid cattle. So the point is we are looking for careers which are making you well paid cattle. The thing is we should be very happy to see that those careers are disappearing. Now the problem that is that we don't know what to do. So what has happened, why education is important, is to get you to rise to the full height of being a man, of being a human. So far we were doing things which animals could do. Well, little more thing. In fact, if you look at the entire factory age, what is the factory? In the factory age, the factory was more important than the worker. There was something which that factory couldn't do for which you needed the human worker. Now we are saying with intelligence that factory is becoming intelligent enough that this human worker is not needed. So I don't need somebody to put from one belt to another, put from something else, check this thing, check whether this is automation. And therefore we are going back and exactly what you said. The human values, empathy, sympathy, support to another human being. These are things which machines can't do for a long, long time. And therefore, it is very interesting. I have no hesitation in saying I was a very sensitive child. And as we were growing up, we were told to become less sensitive, become more machine-like. Don't weep, don't cry, don't show sorrow. And especially if you are a male, then crying is completely taboo. Right? Oh, why not? Crying is one of the most important human emotions. If I don't feel tears coming out of somebody's situation, and even if you remember when we are young, when you see a movie, you end up crying. And you say, नहीं करना, क्यों क्यों रोते हो? ये तो बहुत ही शर्म की बात है. Now exactly the idea is wrong. We were trained to become like machines. Do your job, do your performance, and in fact, many of us, the main macho was that you didn't care about what was going on at home, what was going on with your family, what was happening to your father, but you said factory product must be out. I think whatever those who were from management, you know there is something called KRA, Key Responsibility Areas, KPI, Key Performance Index. So a friend of mine very nicely said, he said, you know KRA, this is all English, Key Responsibility. What it means in Hindi is, क्यों रखे हैं आपको? So this is all they want. कि आप ये करोगे, चाहे कुछ हो जाए. And those of you have this idea of any literature. One of the very nice poems which I read at a small time, you can Google for it, is called The Song of the Shirt. It was about women who were stitching shirts by hand. And it is called The Song of the Shirt. You can even Google it. It was again very, in fact, I say this very often. If you look at a small child, class 5, 6, the child is interested in singing, dancing, painting, all kinds of things. Hey, Pythagoras theorem पढ़ो IIT coaching. Now this is the point. This is IIT coaching नहीं करने की जरूरत है. हम वो करेंगे जो हमारे करने का मिला. Now we tend to think that और किसी चीज है. Now you have seen so many sports people getting good money, so many other people getting good money. So as the role of humans expand, humans will pay money for other things which give them happiness, fulfillment, etc. You know, entertainment centers, Disneyland का idea क्या है? Disneyland में कोई factory नहीं है. Disneyland is a place where you enjoy it. And as more and more of these things develop, and you will even actually have a place, a whole set of places where you are excited with mental tasks, not only lower level entertainment. Many must have seen that when you solve a puzzle, you solve a problem, you get joy. Sudoku कितने लोग खेलते हैं? क्यों खेलते हैं? Because it gives you a certain amount of joy. More and more of these will start developing as we go along. Yeah.
Can I add to
Sure.
what Ma'am is saying?
You want to
add one question?
इनका follow-up question आप parliament में इनका
So
follow-up
one of the things I've read about is, I mean, it's an age-old philosophy of the Buddhism is transient, okay? And that has become very important. You mentioned the emotional quotient, which is equally important because to learn as teachers, as educators, to listen a lot more to our students. We get complaints every day. Even as adults, we complain to our bosses, so children like to listen. But an example I would like to give you about this transience is a boy that came through my office, and so he went to do, because his parents couldn't afford it or didn't get a scholarship, he went and did computer science in India. And then he said, oh, he'll do his postgraduate. So he went to do his postgraduate at a very fine university in Paris, you know, and he did his 1 year, 2 year course there in psychology. Okay, and then he's like, okay, now it's time to, you know, get a job and see what I can do with that. And eventually, because he had a friend, I think, or some connection at Edinburgh, and the friend who'd gone for a job didn't get that job and felt that this friend in Paris would be more suited for the job. So he went all the way to Edinburgh and got an interview with Uber. Uber is a company that delivers food. Now, you've done computer science in India very finely. You've done psychology as a master's. What are you doing working with Uber, a food company? You know, and he came back and I asked this question. I said, you know, it was the psychology part and my efficiency in the ICT area. And I know that I'm just be shuffling everybody around delivering foods. But at the end of the day, I was able to read into the minds of people what kind of food they wanted to eat and various other things with my computer skills is what got me the job. So he was able to do so many different things and get the job. You know, and the other thing is to keep your mind open and take on extra knowledge other than your syllabus and your curriculum. So there was another kid who was literally late at an interview and a job in London, and again one of my students from my previous school. And the interviewer allowed him in, said, come, sit down, and whatever. And because he was late, he had just borrowed some friend's socks or something. And the socks were, and this interview was in London, and the socks were of Chelsea Football Club. And you know, the interviewer, sir, didn't talk to him about anything to do with the job, and said, tell me more about Chelsea Football Club. Because the boy was well read in football and was interested, he could talk, and he got the job because that's how it was. So the idea is to keep our children open-minded, questioning, and allow them to gain other knowledge other than the syllabus we have so intensely given to them. Thank you.
Absolutely, absolutely. So in fact, it's very good that this is one of the things that we have to tell people who are looking for careers, that there are no careers in the future. In future, it is about what do I bring to the table. The Latin phrase for this, which is used in law, is called sui generis. So I often tell people, just like each of you have a unique fingerprint, you have a unique identity which you have to establish, that this is what I can do and nobody else can. You have to become a go-to person for a certain thing. And the other thing I want to share with this, because she brought in Buddhism, one of my interest areas is the market share of different religions. So I tell many people who are entrepreneurs, I said, you're wasting your time in all these things. The biggest opportunity in business is creating a new religion and go on. So to prepare for that new religion, you need to see the market share of existing religions. The market share of existing religion is the highest for Christianity. It is about 30% of the world is Christian. Next is Islam, which is about 25% and rising very fast because they are a younger population and expanding. Hinduism is our population in the world, 14% or so. Sikhism, Jainism is about 4%. Buddhism is again in a single digit and so on. I give a lot of examples about the marketing of Christianity and the marketing of Buddhism. See, Buddhism is an intellectual religion. And the marketing of Buddhism was done in a certain way, which was not massively. He says, be responsible to yourself, understand yourself, there is no right path. You have to take a median path from these eightfold things and so on. Consumers don't like it. Consumers like a simple religion. I can do whatever I want and Jesus Christ will deliver me. I can do whatever I want. I go to that mandir and Mata Di will deliver me. Jai Mata Di and all. Now you say that you are responsible for your thing. What you do will always live after you. Your karma has to be handled responsibly. You will get no audience. So it is very interesting as I thought of Buddhism, because Buddhism is least followed because it is a very challenging thing. And Buddha himself says, don't agree with me, don't believe me. Just to, in fact, his famous statement to his disciple Anand, when he was about to die, Anand said, what will we do after you? Now everybody says, after me, worship me. Buddha says, no, be a lamp unto yourself. Now, who wants that? अपने ही को कर लगाना होता तो फिर कैसे होता आपका? So the whole idea of religion or education is to give a simple path. But what the future is about is you have to steer yourself and you have to find how you will go around. But in terms of your thing, more and more things will become automated as we understand them. And things which look very difficult today will become easier. I will, in due course, even give you more comments on the limitations of AI and automation, etc. But it will gradually expand more and more. Things which you did not believe could be done automatically are being done and will continue to be done. But there was somewhere at the back, somebody wanted to say something, or it's time for you? Yes.
A very good evening, sir. I'm Jyoti from Academic University. I've been very fortunate and privileged listening to you in person after a number of years. So my question is related to education again, and it's from all the colleagues' deliberations here, and obviously the very important word that you had triggered is creativity. As we all know, a child is born creative, curious, creative, and the rote learning system actually curbs it. But now, because I'm in the higher education system, the challenge that I have experienced in the last few years is, when the child goes to higher education system, the expectation is that you now be creative and innovative. It's so ironical, we were born creative. We curb creativity for good 13, 14 years, and the child doesn't even know that the right brain exists. I'm sorry if I'm being very candid and blunt about it, but now we are exposing to creative thinking and the right brain functioning, and suddenly, overnight, after the class 12 boards, the child is in a huge campus and we want them to be creative, innovative. Do not look at books that we will not give you notes. Now go to the library that probably child has never visited, buying the storybooks. So this is an irony of our education system, sir. How do we bridge this gap? We are talking of education, but I somehow, maybe it's my short-sightedness, but I fail to see the bridge between our entire communication or education channel, right from kindergarten to higher education. I think we leave the children and the parents completely confused what is expected out of them. Because after this education, the company wants something else. I don't know what the child is actually learning. 1 year of university education or college education is the transient phase where the child is struggling to the new environment from school to college. From second year, we are asking them to do internships. From third year, the placement drive starts and all this starts, and the companies come. And fourth year, actually the degree is not over, but they are in jobs. So I just would like to know your take on this, sir.
No, I have absolute clarity on this. Firstly, most people who are talking of creativity are being completely hypocrites because they have no desire for creativity. I think that you're talking about creativity, but the fact of the matter is that they are not looking, they want, whatever, they didn't give you the right definition of creativity. Give 3 steps for creativity. They are not oriented towards it. And I will give you examples of my own thing. Long years ago, when I was just out of Indira Gandhi National Open University, the Delhi government, Chief Minister's office, actually invited me and I presented to them a proposal 20 years ago, etc., of this idea of an internet-based education system for Delhi. He said, why are people going 40 miles every day to a college to study something? They can go to the nearest cyber cafe. That was the age of cyber cafes. and they can engage what we are doing today at the table. It was, I had no interest in this, so I wasn't saying I want to do this. It was just an idea for the good of education. Chandrababu Naidu was not done such a thing, so we will not do it. So they want creative ideas which are well established. So they go further. I with some people at there was a state in India called Chhattisgarh, which had created a very innovative act for creating private universities. It was called the Chhattisgarh Private Universities Act. And the innovation there was that just like you can launch a company by registering under the Companies Act and fulfilling something, you could create a university by applying to the Chhattisgarh University Act and creating your university. There would be a proposal, there is the Senate approval, etc. The former chairman of UGC, unfortunately, is passed away, Professor Yashpal. He went to Supreme Court and argued before the Supreme Court, looking at dictionary meaning of encyclopedia in encyclopedia what university is. The university cannot be like this. And finally, on what principle they quashed it, because there was nothing on merit. They said that under the UGC Act, every university must be created by a separate act of parliament or an act of legislature. How can they have a single act? We can create a number of universities. These are not idiots. Who are idiots? Right? And therefore, anything of creativity coming from UGC, forget it. They have absolutely no idea, no intention of doing that. They sometimes hear this is a buzzword, creativity, and they want it, but there is no desire to do that. And I am giving you these two concrete recorded examples. And now they are talking about digital university for all over India, etc., etc. So the point is, you are absolutely right. Whenever we are in see, in fact, you will be surprised. Do you know when IITs first came? Many parents did not send their children to IIT. I know a person who met me. She said she was a national scholarship holder in school. She came into IIT, Delhi, and also Delhi University. At that time, the rule was that if you were a national scholarship holder, you could carry on for the university, but not if you went to IIT Delhi. And she said, my father saw that both are government things, that he is giving for university, not for IIT. So my father said, go to Delhi University. So this is the problem, that people are not able to figure out. So when IITs were new, it wasn't such a, because people knew Hindi College of Engineering was from ancient times. Banaras Engineering College, Benko from this thing. Roorkee, your grandfather would have done civil engineering from Roorkee. IITs were complete upstarts. IIT got their reputation after that upstart education was recognized by the US universities. And in fact, if you remember, in the early days of IIT, there were no IITs with Indian Engineering Services or IIS. They all went abroad. It was a very different thing. So this is what is very interesting. It is human nature to avoid new things. Because if something is new and unproven, you don't have to. Today what has happened is, we have to do new things and understand what is the promise of these new things. Are they going to be false hopes? Are they going to be hype? Or is there going to be a genuine promise? And very often, it is difficult to find the value of such things, because some things take time for their value, positive or harmful, to be really brought in. I will tell you two stories of this, but let us have any other comments.
Any question?
Myself, Dr. O.P. Nautya. I'm scientist in science and technology, user to Dehradun. First of all, I would like to thank Techno Hub for such a wonderful interaction. जैसे कि आपसे ड्यूरिंग द कोविड एंड लॉकडाउन लगातार आपका जो सेशन चलता रहा, मुझे लगता है कि बहुत सारे लोग उससे बेनिफिट हुए हैं और आज भी बहुत सारी चीज़ें यहाँ पे आ रही हैं। जैसे अभी तक आपने भी कहा कि हमारे जैसे जो लोग हैं, वी आर लर्निंग हिस्ट्री ऑफ द साइंस जो साइंस के बजाय हमने हिस्ट्री ऑफ द साइंस पढ़ी है, दादाजी ने भी पढ़ी, पापा जी ने भी पढ़ी, मेरे बड़े भैया ने भी पढ़ी, मैंने भी वही साइंस पढ़ी है। लेकिन अब जैसे आपने कहा कि ये वी आर मूविंग टुवर्ड्स द एजुकेशन 4.0 एंड 5.0, तो हमारी चैलेंजेस भी उसी अंदाज में अब बढ़ रहे हैं। तो मेरा क्वेश्चन आपसे यह रहेगा कि किस प्रकार से हम उन चैलेंजेस को फेस कर सकते हैं, बिकॉज वी आर मूविंग टुवर्ड्स द एजुकेशन 4.0 एंड 5.0। थैंक यू।
So, पहली बात जो मैं आपको ये बता रहा था, और मैंने इसे आइंस्टाइन वाली बात से कहा था कि हमको ये पहचानने की जरूरत है कि कहाँ पे बदलाव आ रहा है। एक बड़ा बदलाव जो आ रहा है वो बड़ा सिंपल है। वैसे उन्होंने केपलर की बात करी थी, जियोसेंट्रिक हेलियोसेंट्रिक की बात करी थी। जो बेसिक बड़ा बदलाव आ रहा है, वी हैव टू शिफ्ट फ्रॉम टीचिंग टू लर्निंग। अभी तक हमारा सारा एम्फोसिस टीचिंग पे रहा है। कोई टीचर होगा, वो पढ़ाएगा, हम स्कूल बनाएंगे, स्कूल में बच्चा जाएगा, टीचर का होगा, MTT, B.Ed, M.Ed, ये वो पढ़ाएगा। और जब तक ट्रेन टीचर से नहीं पढ़ाया जाएगा तब तक बच्चा नहीं सीखेगा। So what we have to now do is we have to find learning and learning। अब इसका बहुत इम्पोर्टेंट है, ये बड़ा सीरियस इशू है। If you think of a teaching model, you will never be able to teach everybody. Teaching model by definition means it will be limited to a few people, whether by birth or by competitive examination। आप CUTET करोगे, जब CG 1500 होंगी तो 15 लाख कैसे सीखेंगे? तो ये टीचर ड्रिवन मॉडल is the one which is to first go, and we should not look at कि टीचरों का क्या होगा, वो अलग से बनेगा। लेकिन आपका अगर ध्यान हो, मेडिसिन में ये चीज आ गई है। आज मेडिसिन वाला इलनेस ट्रीटमेंट की बात नहीं करता है, हेल्दी लिविंग की बात करता है। ये बहुत इंपॉर्टेंट है। टीचिंग a syllabus, टीचिंग a क्वालिफिकेशन से आप बात कर रहे हो टू बिकम अ लर्नर, सेल्फ डायरेक्टेड लर्नर, लाइफ लॉन्ग लर्नर। हम लोग आज हेल्दी लिविंग की बात कर रहे हैं। वो डॉक्टर आपको ये भी कहता है एक्सरसाइज पे जाओ, ये भी कहता है मीठा मत खाओ, ये भी कहता है कि प्रोटीन ज़्यादा खाओ, मूंग की दाल का चिल्ला खाओ, ये सब करता है। दिस इज अ बिग चेंज दैट इज हैपनिंग। हम अभी ये कहते थे नहीं, सिलेबस पढ़ो, थ्योरम 8 ज्योमेट्री तुमको आनी चाहिए, पर अब हम कह रहे नहीं, थ्योरम 8 कहीं से भी सीख लो, तुम कहीं से भी सीखना तुम्हें आना चाहिए। एंड फॉर्चुनेटली न्यू एजुकेशन पॉलिसी में कहा गया है that learning how to learn is more important than learning of subjects। बट ये कह तो दिया, जैसे क्रिएटिविटी कहती है, करेंगे कैसे? आप सीखना सिखाएंगे कैसे? तो ये एक बहुत इम्पोर्टेंट चीज आती है कि हमें लोगों को सेल्फ डायरेक्टेड लर्नर बनाना है। और एजुकेटर्स का काम क्या होने वाला है? एजुकेटर्स का काम होने वाला है टू बिकम गाइड्स फॉर सेल्फ लर्निंग। अब जैसे आप देख रहे होंगे, मैंने कई बार आपको किसी किताब का नाम, किसी ऑथर का नाम, किसका ये नाम का, मैंने वो पूरा रिपीट नहीं किया कि वो क्या क्या करता है, क्या कहता है, ये वो जो हम BA में करते हैं। क्यों करते हैं? अरे आप बता दीजिए, जीन पियाजे की थ्योरी पढ़ो। आपको बहुत कहना है कि आपका जो जीन पियाजे ने 4 स्टेजेस ऑफ डेवलपमेंट बताए थे, उसने ये किया था, उसने बहुत सारे लाखों लोगों का डेटा नहीं लिया था, अपने 3 बच्चों को ऑब्जर्व किया था। ऑब्जर्वेशन एंड इंसाइट इज मोर इम्पोर्टेंट देन लार्ज अमाउंट ऑफ डेटा। और अब जाके आप पढ़ो, और अब आप अप्लाई करो, अब आप अपने बच्चे में अप्लाई करो और देखो कि वो जो जीन पियाजे ने उस समय करा था प्री इंटरनेट एज में, वो इंटरनेट के बच्चे में कहाँ पे आता है। सो स्टेजेस ऑफ लर्निंग अब इंटरनेट के बच्चे के लिए कहाँ जाती है? कब वो बटन दबा के कर लेगा, कब करेगा, कब वो सर्च करेगा, सीख करेगा। सो दिस इज द पॉइंट दैट वी हैव टू मेक पीपल एक्टिव एक्सप्लोरर्स ऑफ लर्निंग, एंड इंस्टेड ऑफ क्रिएटिंग कोर्सेज एंड लेक्चर्स we create learning experiences। तो मैं आजकल की मेरी भाषा में यही होता है कि I create a learning event, I create a learning experience, and I create pathways for learning, and so on and so forth। और अभी और क्वेश्चन थोड़ा इंटरेस्टिंग बता देता हूँ इसको। तो हमारे यहाँ जो ट्रेडिशन है वो दत्तात्रेय के 24 गुरु का है। सुना है आपने दत्तात्रेय के 24 गुरु की कहानी? किसी ने नहीं सुनी है? तो आप गूगल कर लीजिए।
थैंक यू सर। फर्स्ट तो मैं क्राउड से रिक्वेस्ट करूंगा कि प्रोफेसर साहब के लिए तालियां होनी चाहिए, बिकॉज सच अ ग्रेट सेशन ही गिवन टू अस, एंड अ टीचर इज ऑलवेज रिमेन अ टीचर because he continuously stand for 2 hours and answering our questions very patiently. So
नहीं, मैं अपील कर रहा हूँ, मैं 2 घंटे की
that's why you stand for 2 hour long session, sir.
दोनों स्टैंडिंग प्रोफेसर
मैं ये बताता हूँ लोगों को कई बार, तो जब मैं सेशंस में, ये तो मेरा ही सेशन है, पैनल अटेंड में होता है, तो लोग मुझे इज्जत से पहला स्पीकर बनाना चाहते हैं। मैं उनसे कहता हूँ आप मुझे इज्जत दो, लेकिन लास्ट स्पीकर अब मैं लास्ट स्पीकर इसलिए क्योंकि मैं बहुत एक्सपीरियंस हूँ और मैं बात को 2 मिनट में भी कह सकता हूँ, 5 मिनट में, तो जितना टाइम बचे तो बाकी लोगों को अपने मन की बात कहना है। लास्ट में जितना टाइम बचेगा मैं 2 मिनट 5 मिनट उसमें कह दूंगा। तो ये मेरा स्टैंडर्ड था। एक दिन बहुत इंटरेस्टिंग हुआ, मैं एक इवेंट में गया था, उनके में एक टॉपिक बड़ा पॉपुलर था, तो उतना वो नहीं रहा, ग्रिड कंप्यूटिंग करके बड़ा पॉपुलर टॉपिक था। तो ग्रिड कंप्यूटिंग पे एक सेमिनार था, डिपार्टमेंट ऑफ इलेक्ट्रॉनिक्स किया था। मैं ऑडियंस में गया था, आई वाज नॉट अ स्लेटेड स्पीकर, बट ऑर्गेनाइजर मुझे जानते थे। थोड़ी देर में मेरे पास क्लिप आया, उसमें लिखा सर कैन यू कम एंड स्पीक फॉर 10-15 मिनट्स। तो मुझे ताकि मैंने उससे कहा मैं तो स्लेटेड स्पीकर नहीं हो रही है, मेरा कोई टॉपिक नहीं। कहते नहीं ऐसा है ना, ये जो यूरोपियन लोग आए थे ये 2-2 मिनट बोल के चुप हो गए, चाय में अभी 20-25 मिनट तो आप आके इन लोगों को कुछ कहते तो मुझे ये एडवांटेज हो गया एक्सपीरियंस का। दूसरा मुझे एक बड़ा इंटरेस्टिंग एडवांटेज है कि मेरी इनिशियल एजुकेशन तो कॉन्वेंट स्कूल में हुई है और इंग्लिश मीडियम में हुई है, पर हम लोग घर में ऑर्थोडॉक्स ब्राह्मण थे, लेकिन मोर इम्पोर्टेंटली उस समय यूपी बोर्ड में 12वीं में यूपी बोर्ड करना पड़ता था और सीनियर कैंब्रिज सिर्फ 11 तक होता था। तो 1 साल के लिए आपको किसी और इंस्टीट्यूशन में जाना पड़ता था जो यूपी बोर्ड। तो उसके लिए हम क्रिश्चियन मिशनरी स्कूल की जगह गवर्नमेंट इंटर कॉलेज में गए। तो गवर्नमेंट इंटर कॉलेज में जाने से क्या हुआ कि हमको ये जितने टेक्निकल सब्जेक्ट्स हैं इसके हिंदी टर्म्स भी आ गए। तो मैं इलेक्ट्रिसिटी में करंट को धारा, पोटेंशियल को विभव, इसको ये सब कह सकता हूँ। मैथमेटिक्स में जिया को जिया स्पर्जिया कोर्स पर जिया सब कुछ कह सकता हूँ। तो उसकी वजह से मुझे और एक मिक्स्ड ऑडियंस में मतलब हिंदुस्तान में अभी भी बहुत जगह फ्लुएंट इंग्लिश लोग कंफर्टेबल नहीं होते हैं। मुझे महाराष्ट्र में तस्वीर भेजा था कि सर थोड़ा बीच में हिंदी में बोल दीजिएगा। ये टीचर्स थे, बट इवन देन it becomes easier for them if you talk in a mix of English and Hindi. एक बार मेरे साथ बहुत मजा हुआ, तो NCERT होता है दिल्ली में हमारे, तो NCERT में किसी इवेंट के लिए मुझे बुलाया था। उसमें बाई चांस ये हिंदी ग्रुप के यूपी वाले कई टीचर आ गए थे और वो थोड़े शैतान से थे। अच्छा हम कंप्यूटर वाले आदमी ये वाले वो सब, तो उन्होंने कुछ हिंदी के कहा सर हम लोग तो सब हिंदी मीडियम वाले हैं, थोड़ा हिंदी में बात करिएगा। और उन्हें लगा हम हिंदी से घबरा जाएंगे। हमने उनसे जब नैसर्गिक प्रवृत्ति की बात करी तो इंग्लिश में बात करी। तो हमारे लिए बहुत अच्छा सा हो जाता है कि जैसे उनका दोनों ही स्टैंडिंग प्रोफेशन है, स्पीकिंग प्रोफेशन है, तो मैं और आप अगर एस्ट्रोलॉजी में देखोगे तो आप कहेंगे कुछ हमारा अच्छा होगा, इसकी वजह से हम ये कर पाते हैं। हमारी सही वाली कहते कि हमने सब कुछ करा वो बुध की वजह से हो रहा है।
नहीं sir, it is an honor to hear you. Myself, Dr. Sandeep Chaudhary from GBIT. Being a higher education teacher, again we are facing the same problem as Madam has today. That students, those who are coming to us, they are not much connected to the education. First, the point is. And the second is, as we are in reference to industry or education 4.0, both are concerned to say that is innovation and learning. Right now, innovation and learning, the concept is entrepreneurship. Now the concept is job creator. So, what our education policy 2020 is focusing on this concern, that learning and innovation is a part of this concern. So how we can inbuild in our students, in the generation those who are in their 12th standard, 10th standard, So how we have to means come up with this, that as you said that ना तो दिया लेकिन करेंगे कैसे? This is the only question from our side, that how we can.
Anyway, you are lucky that I have a hands-on experience in this. तो हम IIT दिल्ली के बोर्ड में भी थे 6 साल। IIT दिल्ली में एक ऐसे ही एंटरप्रेन्योरशिप डेवलपमेंट वगैरह का सेंटर होता है, वो होता है। तो वो लोगों को फंड भी करता है, सपोर्ट भी करता है। तो एक बार हमारे पास बोर्ड में ये मैटर आया कि ये 4-6 बच्चे हैं, ये अब करना नहीं चाहते हैं उसको, दे वांट टू गिव इट अप। एंड चूंकि IIT ने उनको फंड किया, सपोर्ट किया, तो उन्हें परमिशन चाहिए कि हम आगे नहीं करना चाहते। तो मैंने उनसे कहा कि अब नहीं करना चाहते हैं तो हम किसी को फोर्स तो कर नहीं सकते एंटरप्रेन्योरशिप इनोवेशन के लिए, तो इनको अलाउ कर दीजिए। लेकिन मैं उन बच्चों से वन-ऑन-वन मीटिंग चाहता हूँ, जब एज एन इंडिविजुअल मिलना चाहता हूँ, उन्होंने मीटिंग ऑर्गेनाइज करें। या IIT के फ्रेश पास आउट हैं, साल 1.5 साल हुआ होगा, दे वर वर्किंग ऑन समथिंग टू डू विद वायरलेस नेटवर्किंग, और उनके गाइड थे BN जैन, जो कि बहुत मशहूर रहे नेटवर्किंग पे। उसके बाद BIT पिलानी के, बिट्स पिलानी के डायरेक्टर भी रहे थे, तो मैं जानता भी था। तो मैंने उनसे कहा, मैंने कहा तुम लोग क्यों छोड़ना चाहते हो? कि क्या ये जैन साहब बहुत एकेडमिक है कि जो बात कर रहे हैं उसका प्रैक्टिकल रिलेवेंस नहीं है, या किसी और ने तुमसे पहले कर डाला? हम लोग तो रिसर्च में कई बार होते, दूसरे के पेपर पहले छप गया तो आपका सारा काम बेकार हो जाता था, या चाइना ने कुछ और ऐसा गड़बड़ कर दिया जिससे ये सब बेकार हो जाएगा, या कोई टेक्नोलॉजी में फंडामेंटल एडवांस आ गया है कि जो तुम लोग कर रहे थे वो इररिलेवेंट हो गया। कि जैसे जब सेलुलर फोन आया तो पेजर इररिलेवेंट हो गया था, पेजर आया लेकिन कुछ ही दिन का मेहमान था बिकॉज सेलुलर का गया। तो उन्होंने जवाब दिया, बड़ा इंसाइटफुल था। उन्होंने कहा सर नन ऑफ दिस, प्रोफेसर जैन इज डूइंग समथिंग, प्रॉब्लम इज स्टिल नॉट सॉल्व्ड, इट इज स्टिल ओवरली टू डू इट। मैंने कहा तो फिर क्यों जाना चाहते हो? और जवाब सुन के आप हैरान रह जाएंगे, बिकॉज हमने तो बचपन से प्रोग्रामर रहे, हमने सारी चीजें दे सोच ली थी। क्योंकि प्रॉब्लम ये हो रही है कि घर में शादी के रिश्ते आते हैं, और वो लोग कहते हैं ये बाकी सारे IIT वाले तो कोई माइक्रोसॉफ्ट में काम कर रहा है, कोई गूगल में काम कर रहा है, ये लोग क्या करें इंक्यूबेशन सेंटर में? और उनको लगता है ये लड़का हो तो गया है फेल, और इसको इंग्लिश में इंक्यूबेशन कह रहे हैं। तो IIT में नहीं होगा इनोवेशन, IIT का कोई बच्चा इंक्यूबेशन नहीं कर सकेगा, माँ बाप समझा ही नहीं पाएंगे। वो तो जो ससुराल वाले लोग कहेंगे फेल हो गया है, अंग्रेजी में हमको इंक्यूबेशन बता के समझा जो पास हो सको। So then I decided that I will do this at school level. तो मैं कई स्कूलों में 12वीं के बच्चों को एंटरप्रेन्योरशिप सिखा रहा था, और मैंने काफी टॉक्स भी दिए, ये भी किए, और उनको सिखाया बिजनेस प्लान बनाना और वो करना, और एलिवेटर पिच सिखाया उनको, और उनको होमवर्क में दिया कि एलिवेटर पिच बना के उसका एक MP4 फाइल हमको भेज दो फॉर इवैल्यूएशन। बच्चों ने बहुत आइडियाज दिए, क्योंकि वो उस समय कर से नहीं, लेकिन उसकी कहानी आपको बताना चाहता हूँ, बहुत इंटरेस्टिंग है। तो बच्चे बड़े एक्साइटेड थे, उन्होंने बिजनेस प्लान भी बनाया, ये भी करे, वो भी करे, वो करे। तो हम बड़े ओपन से होता था, हमने बच्चों को अपना ईमेल सब भेजा। शाम तक एक ईमेल आ गया, तो हमारा एक स्टार्टिंग पॉइंट था, दिस इज द बेस्ट टाइम टू बिकम एन एंटरप्रेन्योर। मैं ये कहना चाह रहा था। वो बच्चे का मेल आया कि सर, if we first finish our graduation and then do this entrepreneurship, then what do you think of it? मतलब इसने बाप से बात करी है, बाप ने कहा बेटा entrepreneurship की सोचना। तो फिर मैंने उसको बताया, मैंने कहा नहीं, मैं ये कहीं से ये नहीं कह रहा हूँ कि वो करो, जितना पढ़ना चाहो पढ़ो, I am the one who will say all the way to PhD वगैरह पढ़ो, but keep thinking of ideas which can become। ऐसे ऐसे करा, बाद में छेड़ते में था, सपोज यू गेट अ वेरी गुड आइडिया राइट हियर, देन मे बी यू डोंट नीड टू गो टू कॉलेज। तो छेड़ा भी उसको उसके साथ। तो ये प्रॉब्लम है कि हमारे पेरेंट्स जो है, वो अगर बच्चे के अंदर कुछ है भी, तो भी वो करने को नहीं देते, क्योंकि उनको ये लगता है कि पहले ये कर लेना चाहिए। और थोड़ा सोशल भी है, मतलब आप ही सोच लीजिए कि आपका बेटा अगर एंटरप्रेन्योरशिप कर रहा है, तो उसके लिए शादी का कोई रिश्ता नहीं आने वाला है, आप ये मान के चल लीजिए। तो वो होता है, और स्पेशली दिस थिंग तो ये अपॉर्चुनिटी कॉस्ट इसको कहते हैं, ये बहुत भारी कॉस्ट है। इसका एंटरप्रेन्योरशिप इंडिया में नहीं हो पा रही है बिकॉज वो, और दूसरा इकोसिस्टम नहीं है। यूएस में सिलिकॉन वैली इसके हुआ कि स्टैनफोर्ड यूनिवर्सिटी भी थी और वेंचर कैपिटलिस्ट भी थे जो पैसा लगाने को तैयार थे। एक लाइन या स्टेटमेंट में $1 मिलियन दे देते थे। गूगल तो ऐसे ही मना, गूगल का तो कंपनी का नाम भी तैयार नहीं था।
AICT अभी इनोवेशन सेंटर और एंटरप्रेन्योरशिप पे ज़्यादा फोकस कर रही है, whether it is helpful or not.
See, AICT का हर काम झूठा होता है, so मुझे कोई दिक्कत नहीं कहने में, मैं तुम सब लोगों को जानता हूँ। ये तो AICT वगैरह ये सारे झूठे, इनका बेसिकली क्या है कि हमारी नौकरी बनी रहे और चूंकि तुमको नौकरी नहीं मिल रही है तो हम कहने एंटरप्रेन्योर। उनका कोई गुण नहीं है, कोई मतलब कोई ईमान नहीं है। और AICT तो इतनी बेईमान संस्था थी, वो पैदा होते ही बेईमान थी, बाकी तो बड़े होके बेईमान थे। AICT पैदा ही बेईमान थी। नहीं, हमको सबको के लिए हम सबके सामने करने को तैयार है।
इसमें सर एक पॉइंट और ऐड करूँ तो अगेन
और दिक्कत क्या है ना, उनको जो फाउंडर AICT के सब चेयरमैन, उन सबको मैं पर्सनली जानता हूँ। आपको एक किस्सा बताता हूँ, मैं आपको एक किस्सा बताता हूँ। ऑर्डिनरी घूसखोर जो होता है वो पकड़ा जाता है तो ऐसे ऐसे करता है और वो करता है, पकड़ा जाता है। ये जो हाई क्लास घूसखोर थे, ये AICT के चेयरमैन थे, मैं पर्सनली जानता हूँ उनको। तो एक कॉलेज में गए इंस्पेक्शन के लिए, यूनिवर्सिटी कॉलेज में गए, तो सबके सामने उसके हेड ने उनको इतना डायमंड का नेकलेस दिया और क्या कहा, सर ये हमारी क्रिस्टल ग्रोइंग लैब में क्रिस्टल बने हैं। इसको कहते हैं चोरी पे सीना चोरी। अब आप क्या कर सकते हो, वो क्रिस्टल शुगर के है कि नमक के है कि डायमंड है, ये तो आप ही जानते हो ना। पर आप ये तो भाई बहुत बड़ी लैब है, उसमें क्रिस्टल ग्रोइंग फैसिलिटी है। क्रिस्टल ग्रोइंग इज अ परफेक्टली वैलिड टेक्नोलॉजिकल प्रोसेस। क्रिस्टल का हमने देखिए, हमको देखने के लिए हमारी लैब में बने क्रिस्टल।
घूस को लीगलाइज कर दिया।
नहीं, लीगलाइज नहीं, उसको टेक्निकल कर दिया। एडवांस ऑफ टेक्नोलॉजी की बात कर रहे हैं वो, और कोई इसका वो नहीं। अच्छा, अब वो उन्होंने जेल में रखे, कोई एविडेंस नहीं कि कोई दूसरा उसका एग्जामिन करके कहे कि नहीं सर वो तो डायमंड थे, ये थे, वो थे। आप बहुत पूछोगे तो कहेंगे वो शुगर की क्रिस्टल थे, भूल गए। नहीं, ये सिविल वाले का नाम को पता नहीं होगा। जब महाकुंभ होता है तो कितना सारा चूना फैलाया जाता है, वो बह जाता है। हरिद्वार में होता है, यहाँ होता है, वहाँ सभी को कुंभ मेले में चूना डिसइंफेक्शन के लिए बहुत बड़ा होता है ठेका। तो चूना होता है, अब आप कहो चूना क्या हुआ, तो बारिश आई बह गया। अब आप ढूंढ लें चूना, रिवर स्ट्रीम में कितना चूना पर मिल पड़ा हुआ है। तो ये पूरा अलग है। हिंदुस्तान इसमें बहुत एक्सपर्ट है और जितने बड़े बड़े लोग हैं वो और एक्सपर्ट है।
एक चीज और
समाजों के दौर हम चाहते थे कि चलते रहे, क्योंकि समाजों के दौर, हाँ सवालों के दौर चलते रहे, लेकिन और सोचते थे कि घड़ी की सुइयां थम जाए। हाँ, लेकिन मैं थोड़ा सा रोक दूंगा, आप लोग चाय पी लीजिए, बिकॉज ही इज इन द बिजनेस ऑफ थिंकिंग। हाँ, सो यू थिंक फॉर सम टाइम so that you have other question. Very good. Give him some.
अच्छा ठीक है, मुझे ये लगा कि ये सोच रहे हैं कि घूस की टेक्नोलॉजी सेपरेट लेक्चर होगा, टेक्नोलॉजी से कैसे घूस की
अलग लेक्चर हो जाएगा।
तो सर I'm happy to
24 कहानियाँ वो
वो नहीं वो दत्ता गुरु के 24 दत्तात्रेय इन्हीं के 24 गुरु थे। उसमें सांप भी गुरु है, वो भी गुरु है, सनातन गुरु भी है। और बेसिकली इट्स लर्निंग इज एन एक्टिविटी यू डू फ्रॉम एनीथिंग यू कैन लर्न। तो मैंने सांप से भी सीखा, उससे भी सीखा, मेडिटेशन से भी सीखा, ये सीखा। So learning is something that you do over whatever interaction. फैक्ट अगर आप साइंस का देखो, साइंस में क्या कहते हैं, कोई भी एक्सपेरिमेंट करो, उसमें क्या कहते हैं, हाँ? नहीं, हम तो रोज ही बच्चों से सीखते हैं।
यहाँ से आप फिर चालू करेंगे। अब तो टी टाइम है, उसको बाद
अरे ठीक है।